right, awesome. So thank you for joining us today. We got a great topic today, understanding your customer and why it's so important to do so in order to be successful in business and especially in cannabis business. We have here today Kay Villamin and Allison Disney. Kay is the co-founder of Hush Chicago. It is a events and marketing agency based in Chicago. And Allison is I have this right here in front of me, the partner and business strategist at Receptor Brands, which is a marketing services agency out of Chicago. And I am a guest moderator today. I am currently the DEI, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Manager at the National Cannabis Industry Association. I'm really happy to be working with Mita on this social equity programming, and also the fact that we'll be able to take this information and provide it as well for our NCIA social equity members. So without any further delay, we're going to go ahead and jump right in today. I'd love for Kay and Allison, if you guys could kind of give a little introduction of yourself, like, how you ended up in this industry, what you do, and, why social equity is important to you in the first place, like why you're here today, volunteering your time to provide this information. So we'll start with whoever wants to go first. Okay, we'll start with Kay. All right, here we go.
Thanks for having me. My name is Kay, based here in Chicago. Like Mike said, I'm co-founder of Hush Chicago. We're an events and marketing agency, and we're primarily focused on serving fellow minority-owned businesses and social equity operators here in Illinois. I got into this industry, one, because I believe in cannabis being medicine. It's been a part of my life for 18 years. My family and loved ones have been impacted by the war on drugs, which is one of the main reasons why I'm here. We came into the space as an event production and marketing agency to really be able to elevate how you celebrate cannabis and to change the perspective on what it is, how we should educate people on it, and how we should celebrate it in a more professional and elevated manner. And so what we've been focusing on is serving brands and creating customized experiences by way of events and marketing services.
Awesome. Thank you, Kay. Appreciate that. And Allison, same question to you.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Mike. Glad to be on the panel with you, Kay. Receptor Brands was started just about a year and a half ago. We are based in Chicago. I'm very proud to be part of the Midwest cannabis community. We feel like we have a very burgeoning community. We're not just the flyover state, particularly when it comes to cannabis and how this industry is growing. We provide end-to-end services, so everything from management and business consulting for those early stage operators who are still trying to define their business, their proposition, their brand story, all the way through to the more traditional things you might think of from an advertising standpoint, in terms of website development, digital assets, marketing that you would see out in the world, and everything in between. We work exclusively with cannabis, CBD, and supporting ancillary services and products to the cannabis industry. And it's really important to me to be a part of social equity and DEI initiatives within this industry. As someone who came up through the marketing and advertising agency industry prior to cannabis, there wasn't a lot of representation even in my immediate network and work community that I was in terms of people of color and particularly women of color. But there were some of those key mentors, particularly women in my career, that helped kind of reach back and help me on my journey. And I hope to do the same, particularly in creative industries like the one that we're in, but also within cannabis, where there are a lot of communities of color that were particularly impacted by a pre-regulated era of this industry. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you both. Got a lot of great experience here in the whole marketing realm of the industry. And I think in some ways being in Illinois and Chicago, so-called behind other states that legalized earlier, I think it gives you guys an interesting perspective, because you really are coming into the industry where earlier on it was just about, you know, you get the weed out there and people are going to buy it, right? There wasn't many shops around and so on and so forth in some of these other states. It was really about early movers. And in Illinois, on the other hand, you guys are coming into a really interesting and dynamic situation where, there's already certain development in the industry. People have started to niche down and really identify different customers, different consumers, and figure out like the different activities that they like or not. And that's how now new companies are starting to differentiate themselves from each other and get away from the competition, so to speak. So that leads us right into this topic, which is understanding your customer. Could you talk a little bit about like what it means to understand your customer? Because I think that from a marketing perspective, it's probably a little bit different the way that you guys talk about, how do you understand your customer and why is it so important to understand that customer? So, whoever wants to go first here again, please feel free. Nobody wants to go first. So how about Allison? Let's go to you. What does it mean to understand your customer and why is it so important?
Of course. Well, whether you're on the B2B or B2C side of this business, wherever you find yourself in the supply chain of cannabis, ultimately, you have to find an audience for what you're creating, what you're either growing or selling or producing, and understanding what benefits your offering has and how that meets a need for a particular person is a critical part in how you tell your story and find an audience for what your service or your product provides. So, for me, when we talk about consumers or even customers on the B2B side and how you define your audience, it really starts with what is the need that that person has, or that group or that segment has, and how does what you have best fit or best serve a solution to help alleviate that need or pain point. So I think truly talking to your consumers and starting to divine them both from a mindset and from a needs perspective is a great place to start. Certainly, everyone loves to talk about demographics and use frequency. Whether you're a light, medium, heavy user of cannabis, but it's really what's that need? Why are you in the category in the first place? Why are you buying or shopping for either a wholesale product or for a consumer product?
Appreciate that. And so it's beyond just I need weed, right? I need something to smoke. It's beyond that, of course. I know I'm being a little bit trite here, but you said something that really struck me was the it's about need and it's about the problem that you're solving with that person, right? I think too often we forget that it's not just, hey, I have a consumer good and somebody wants it and that's it. So how do you figure out what your consumers need, what your customers need in the first place, other than just at that top level of they need good weed, right? Isn't that what everybody says? So Kay, could you answer that question? Like, how do you find out what your customers need?
Yeah, I think it's as simple as talking to people. I think, especially these days, people are looking for connection and real people to talk to instead of calling an 800 number, looking up a website and, not finding a face to attach to the brand. Really, it's understanding who you are selling to and who you are serving, understanding their language, being in places where they would hang out, and whether that's a social network or a physical place, but really diving deep and understanding who, it's interesting in cannabis because there's just so many levels of that, right? But I think if you really fine tune who it is you want to serve and help and find how you can help them, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And like I said, I think one of the main ways is one, right now social media is a strong place to communicate, but it really is just asking questions, communicating on a more human level, and not sounding like a big brand just trying to fish information from people, but really just you know asking questions and getting to know people as if they're your friend, really, and your family, and seeing what they need. Just like what you said earlier, Allison, just coming from like a needs basis, just really figuring out how you can serve. And that's really how you're going to understand who you're talking and selling to.
Appreciate that.
It can
Allison, do you have anything you'd like to add? Yeah.
just to build on that point, I think it's sometimes harder as people, as human beings, to talk about what you think you might want from a category, or something, especially something as new as cannabis. But if you ask people what are their problems, what are their pain points, people typically have an easier time articulating what they wish there was more of, or what they wish that they had that's missing. So sometimes that's a good place to start.
That was going to be my next question. So it's rather than just saying, "Hey, what do you need?" Because the answer is just going to be, "I need good weed," right? What are you maybe not getting? What are you missing? Where's a gap? What are you not getting from your current provider, right? What are you not seeing when you go into the store and you walk out either frustrated or without what you wanted or spending too much money on something, right? Um, so those kinds of questions, I think, are what you guys are talking about, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. Okay, awesome. So I have a good question here for you. You mentioned demographics and kind of like, user frequency and things like that, Allison. One of the things we talk about is doing the ideal client archetype, right? So like taking, writing down like who it is that you're serving by, their age and their, male, female, whatever it may be, right? Their basic demographics, how much money they make. You might start adding things like, they smoke every day, they use edibles once a week, whatever it may be, right? Um, Now, when we were doing the preparation for this call, I thought what was really interesting was you mentioned that archetypes and demographics and things like that can actually be confusing, and that we have to remember that people are people and they're human beings. So, could you speak to kind of like how you approach the whole archetypal ideal client type of aspect of things?
Sure. I mean, so demographics and usage frequency, and someone's familiarity with the category is helpful context when you get into execution, and you're trying to make a relevant message for someone. But as you mentioned, Mike, at the end of the day, we're still talking about people. We're talking about humans, and I think where those indicators can be tricky is if you define someone just by their demographics, you're sort of leaving out the behavior piece. And as someone who's an enthusiast and an advocate for this category too, sometimes I want a low dose product because of the occasion I'm using it, and sometimes I want something that's a little higher dosage. And I'm just one person, but I can still occupy different mindsets, different need states, different occasions. And if you define your audience only by demographic, like household income, geography, age, you're sort of discounting the fact that we're human beings, and there's different occasions and different contexts for how we engage with products and use them in our life. In addition to identifying what's that problem, what's that need state, what are the behaviors that can help you define your audience in a more nuanced way? And there's lots of ways to get feedback too. Every click on your website is a piece of feedback, that shows some intent, it shows some interest. Talking to people, as we were saying earlier, don't just ask them about your product use case, ask them about what they do in their life, ask them about different scenarios where they think about cannabis and places where they don't, that maybe they could be. I think really getting to the heart of how people behave in their life, and understanding what's relative to them outside of this category can give you more insight into, okay, this is how my product can serve them better in the context of their life.
Awesome. That's great insight. It's leading me to my next question, but I actually want to hear what Kay has to say on this topic as well. How do you kind of approach this problem of understanding your customer and the kind of building the archetype, but not trying not to stereotype at the same time?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Allison was saying. I 100% agree to everything you just said. I think a huge something helpful would be to have, a level of cultural literacy when it comes to cannabis. And what I mean by that is sometimes it would, or no, not sometimes, but I think it would help if you as a brand or you as a business owner consume cannabis yourself as well, because it would help you understand the different levels of these demographics or archetypes that you have been, researched on and reported. But I think, like for me, it helps that it's been a part of my lifestyle. And so I can, I can relate to different levels of consumers, where whether they're just, novice users, they're just getting into it, or they're just, they're low dosers, and maybe, just like what you said, Alison, sometimes you want something a little bit heavier and maybe you're not there yet and you're trying to build up your tolerance. And these things also evolve so quickly over time, as tolerance builds up quickly as well. So I think, for me, that has been really helpful. Being part of the culture, cannabis being involved in my personal lifestyle has helped me understand my audience.
I appreciate that. So my next question is actually like, I don't want to say playing devil's advocate here, but like looking at things through the lens of, it sounds nice to get out there and interact with your ideal customers and kind of test the marketplace out. And I mean, that all makes sense to me, right? I get all that. But I also know that a lot of folks I talk with struggle with doing that, right? They kind of maybe just talk to a couple of their friends that they think might be like their target customer, or they'll go kind of drop into a Facebook group and read a few posts and maybe make a comment or two, right? I'm not trying to be pessimistic here, but I am just trying to be realistic where, so these folks that are listening here today, that maybe are struggling with that. Like, what do you have any suggestions for that? Like how to get over that hump of like going outside of your kind of small circle and stuff? Like, what are some tangible things that people can do to get that information, to get a better insight into their customer? What are the real specific tangible things that you would recommend?
Sure, I'll go first. Well, one of the silver linings I think of last year is that our ability to communicate with one another from the comfort of our sofas has never been easier. And I never, imagined I would be able to say that if you had asked me in 2019. But the ability to engage with other human beings virtually and digitally, it has never been easier. And there's a lot of tools out there to survey, even if you're starting with friends and family, but you want to kind of grow that circle, one level wider. Surveymonkey, it's a free tool. Anyone can launch a survey from Surveymonkey, and you can send it to as many people whose contact information you have. There's a lot of other tools out there too if you want to get into larger scale feedback loops, and target and filter a little bit more in terms of maybe their proclivity to cannabis. But there is so many different ways through social media and different listening tools to get a beat on the pulse of how people feel.
Yep, I think, again, adding to that, social media has been a great tool. Especially for, those who are shy or introverted, and, you could hide behind a profile or your computer. You could join network groups on Facebook, Instagram, and just, make comments and conversations. Do polls on your Instagram stories or on Facebook where you can just ask simple questions and people can reply right away. I think that social media is a great way to just communicate and reach a large group of people without even having to show your face or speak. So you can just be typing everything. So I think it's a great way to just, initial steps to get out of that shell.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I mean, that's something that I think a lot of folks that are making either the transition from the legacy space into the regulated space, or that are making the transition to business ownership in general, I think need to hear is that, the encouragement side of it, like get out there and do it. Use tools that are easy, like SurveyMonkey or social media, right? But you have to do something. You can't just assume that if you run it by a few people that are your tight little inner circle, that it's going to be giving you the real understanding of your ideal customers and how they're going to be receiving your same message, right? The last thing you want to do is to launch your brand, launch your product because you talked to a handful of people and you took your life savings, you put it into that, and then you launch it out assuming it's going to work. And it turns out that, I don't know, maybe the strain it doesn't really hit right for people, or maybe it's a product that, like, it's a topical that it's too oily for people, but your friends didn't want to tell you that it was too oily, right? Something like that. I've seen that happen over and over again, and that makes people go back into their shell even further. So I think getting out of your shell early is the message I'm really hearing from this. Get out of your shell early. Go talk to people, whether it's in a Facebook group or whether it's at an event, and just get to know see how they respond. No, don't be afraid to have them respond negatively. I think is another thing too. How do you think about like negative? Like, say you go to somebody who you think is your ideal customer. They fit the description in all the different ways that you've thought about, and they have a totally negative, take on your product. What do you say to those folks?
Thank you. Thank you. Because especially in those early stages, if you can get honest, transparent feedback about areas or ways to improve your product or service, it's the biggest gift. To your point, Mike, before you scale and invest a lot in taking what you've created and sharing it with the masses, the more feedback you get on how to optimize what you're doing early, the better.
And what if you have gotten no negative feedback, right? Should you keep going until you get negative feedback, or is it just that you struck gold?
I think that I have yet to experience a no negative feedback, but I think, like you said, Allison, that's great information for you to get, is when someone says no, right? But then what happens when someone says yes all the time? I think that's when you step back and really think about, not everyone being your customer, and who truly is it that you want to represent your brand, want to share your brand to the rest of the public, want to be advocates for your brand, and pretty sure that's not everybody. And so even if you get all these yeses, it's up to you to say no as well.
Okay. Maybe you're also asking the wrong questions. Maybe you're asking to the wrong people. They don't want to say no or give you negative feedback, or maybe you're just asking the question too broad a way because you are afraid of hearing no. Like, hey, do you think this product is cool? It's like, yeah, sure, it's awesome. As opposed to, hey, would you buy this and spend $25 on it?
Right.
So that's a different question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
sometimes too, especially in a regulated category, right, where there's rules about sampling and all of those things, or even if you're talking about a non-product based good or service, maybe you're looking at opening retail or something like that. Sometimes it's easier too to ask people about someone else's brand or product, right? So if you're thinking about retail, ask people what they think about where they currently shop. What do they like? What don't they like about it? What do they wish was better? Are they only shopping there because it's the closest thing, or is there a reason that they might drive an extra block to go to a different dispensary? If it's a product, or if you're a cultivator, ask them what they like about the flower varieties that they've tried, on their last shopping trip. Or if there's a product or brand like yours where you think you might have a similar audience, maybe they're going to be a future competitor, ask them what they think about that product or brand. And that'll still give you insight into what you can do, and why that person has an affinity for what or not for what they're currently shopping for, and maybe there's an opportunity there too. But if you're getting too many yeses, and maybe you have really nice friends and family who don't want to give you any criticism, but they might be more willing to criticize something else.
Okay, that's really insightful right there. That's some good advice. I like that a lot. And it actually opens up, another thing for me here is, and I completely lost my question that I had here. So, Kay, did you have something you'd like to add? I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but yeah.
So let me think. No, but going back to what you said earlier, Mike, like asking the right question. People in my experience, people love to give their advice, especially when it's not needed, right? And
Right.
so it's asking questions, like more specific questions, like, what can I do to make my packaging better? Like, do you like this color? Being really super specific in those questions, just to get the feedback that you like. And just making sure that, again, like going back to, is it, are the people that you're asking questions to, are they the people that you want to buy your product, So just being aware of that too, being aware of who you're talking to, who you're asking these questions to. Do you value their opinion or not? I think these are some questions that you have to ask yourself as well.
Oh, that's great. And I actually had a very, I would say, frustrating conversation recently because we had a whole hour-long conversation about somebody's feedback that was not the target market. It was not the ideal customer, and we identified that very quickly. And yet we still sat there for 45 minutes, whatever it was, really digging into what they had said and trying to figure out how to pivot based on that and whether we should change copy or not on that. And I think it's like, it's like, look, like, to your point, hey, if they're not an opinion that you value, then don't value it, right? Like, don't listen to it because it doesn't matter. Somebody that's outside your target market, you're not going to, what is it they say? If you market to everybody, you're marketing to nobody, right? And that's the problem, right? If you try to get everybody to love your product, it's not necessarily a good thing. It's going to lead to a lot of muddying. So that leads me to something else too, is the lifestyle brand, right? Or the podcast. Okay, you see a lot of social equity folks kind of taking that route as a way to kind of break into the industry or the regulated industry at least, without necessarily having a license or having the investment behind them yet, right? Um, I'd love to get your take on, just any advice or thoughts you have about really what it takes to understand your customer and the lifestyle side of things. Because what I've noticed is, there's a lot of times when I talk to people about launching, they're asking me about launching a lifestyle brand and what do you think and all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, who are you launching it for? And their answer is just for social equity people. And I say, okay, well, how do you define that? Well, people that have been impacted by the war on drugs, right? Or they say people like me, right? Like, like themselves, right? But it's like, okay, so define that further, and the conversation gets a little bit sideways. So, I'd love to hear your take on, what you would say to that person that is launching a podcast or a lifestyle brand specifically, as a way to get into the industry that will eventually maybe lead to a retail space or lead to selling, products in the regulated space. What would you say to the folks that are launching these lifestyle brands?
Well, I'll jump in to circle back to our earlier conversation. I mean, I think you can't assume that every audience that we're all homogenous, we're all ubiquitous. Lifestyle is a way of expressing, finding some sort of cultural connection to a particular audience and appealing to them in a relevant way that enhances their way of life, right? So we're not binary. Again, we're human, and we all have different influences and aspects to our culture and lifestyle that make them unique. Now, that doesn't mean you can't carve out a particular sort of lifestyle that you want to be a part of, but it will still help to define that in some way, define who your audience is, so that you can make sure, to Kay's earlier point, it's really difficult and capital intensive to appeal to everyone all the time, right? And you will probably have a hard time being really relevant to anyone if you're trying to appeal to that broad of an audience. So the more dialed in you can get to, like, all right, how do I define that lifestyle? And then what am I, if it is something media related, like a podcast, or something in the non-licensed side of the category, again, like, how does this enhance that lifestyle that I'm trying to be a part of? And if you can't define what that is in a more human way, then you're going to have a hard time probably serving your offering in a way that's really going to hit with people. I mean, again, I try to always remind people, you don't have to be your consumer, but you do have to put yourself out of your marketing hat occasionally and out of your founder corporate hat and think about consumers as people. How do you feel when a product tries to come alongside you in your life? And when can you tell when it feels false or a little bit hollow versus when it really fits with how you feel about how you live your lifestyle?
Awesome. The thing that really sticks out to me, the word that really comes up is authentic. I think, when you're creating a lifestyle brand or a podcast, being your authentic self, because it's not going to go very far if you're just trying to fill a role, so to speak, or act a certain way. or play a part. And it's also maybe not going to go a certain way if you're just, again, you don't authentically try to get everybody in the world to like you. So why would you do that in this situation? Like I can't, I mean, there are those people in school that we went to school with that everybody liked, right? But at the end of the day, as we got older, we found out that most people didn't know them that well. So, the people that I feel like had really solid friendships in high school, the people that I knew back then, it's like, I always think it was like we were authentic, enough, right, to ourselves that we found our group that we meshed with and we interacted with everybody else in the room. But it was really only certain people that bought into that lifestyle that we had. I think of high school because that's like easy to think about all the cliques and everything like that, and each clique basically bought the same products from the same stores, as people within their own cliques did. And I think it's similar with doing podcasts and lifestyle brands and things of that nature. Kay, did you have anything you wanted to add? I actually have a specific question for you here, but I wanted to get any input if you have it on that.
Yeah, I think you know some people make the mistake of thinking that they're a lifestyle brand, and then all they do is post photos of themselves smoking and think that they can relate to everyone. And we're talking about lifestyle here, which means it's a little bit more comprehensive, and finding ways to integrate cannabis into that lifestyle. So I think if you um, can really identify what you do stand for, not just your belief in cannabis being medicine or being a huge part of your life, but the other aspects of your life that you stand for. What are those values that you stand for? What are the things that you believe in that other people might also believe in? I think especially coming out of this post-pandemic world and everything that we were exposed to in the last year, there are more conscious consumers out there, and people are a little bit more selective, and aware of the brands that they follow and resonate with, and they are looking for community as well. And so I think if you really think about life as a person, living in your shoes and all the different aspects of it, and how cannabis is integrated into that, and what other things you stand for, and what are those values and principles and those beliefs that you truly believe in, your ideal customers will be brought to you just almost effortlessly. People will resonate, they'll connect, they'll really buy into your brand, not just your product. And so I think that's something that people really need to consider is what do you stand for? People want to support those who stand for similar things.
Yeah, and if I could just build one more thing, Mike, before you go on the next question. Kay reminded me as well, like she's right. We all have limited time, attention, resources, right? And so whenever we're asking someone to read a post, listen to a podcast, buy our product, right? You're asking that there's a value exchange taking place. So it's always important to think about, what is this piece of content, or what is this thing that I'm offering? What's the value it's creating for the person who's giving up their time, energy, sometimes money to engage with it? And it could be something small. It could be a moment of entertainment. It could be some affirmation of that core value that Kay mentioned. It could be some information or education. It could be a little bit of levity. There's lots of ways you can create value for someone. But at the end of the day, if there isn't some exchange for that time or attention that they're giving you, the opportunity for them to come back around to your brand again, if it feels like they're just being spoken to or talked at in an irrelevant way, it's going to be few and far between.
Awesome. No, I love that. It's authentic and bringing value and having the values. And I think this, circling back again to the topic at hand, the understanding your customer, if you're trying to find customers in life, with your lifestyle brand or with your cannabis brand, that have similar values as you understand them a lot better already. But then again, not assuming that you understand everything about them. So making sure that you have conversations with them, ask them questions, find out what they don't like about your competitors, find out what they do like about your competitors. The main thing is have those conversations, engage with them, don't make assumptions. I think one of the worst things we can do in business is make assumptions. Just that leads to lots of problems. And there was one thing, and I'm going to do a shameless plug here for Kay, because you didn't mention it, and I know you're pretty humble here, but I love your jewelry line, and I love it not because of the jewelry itself. Like I don't care about jewelry, right? Personally, okay. But what I love about it is the story behind it, which is, the why behind it, which is why it really does create that engagement with your customers. And I think it shows a real deep understanding of your customers. So if I could just get you to kind of talk a little bit about, what was behind that and like why you created that jewelry line in the first place. I'd love you to add those insights. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for the plug. But so we created a jewelry collection called Hush Jewelry, and it's actually called the Hush Collection, THC. And so it's a curated lineup of Chicago and cannabis inspired jewelry, really small kind of incognito pieces um, that really just initially served as emblems of the plant and to spark that conversation with people, who may not want to talk about it, but it's, if I'm wearing it, they say, oh, that's an interesting, piece that you have there. And then it already tells them a little bit more about me. And so it opens up this wider conversation on cannabis and whether or not they're, new to cannabis or don't know too much. It allows us to get into a space where we can openly talk about it. And we also created the line so that we can be, above ground and participate in more mainstream environments such as festivals, expos, trade shows, where we would be the only cannabis brands there representing the plant, but also opening up the conversations. Again, it's all about talking to people, getting to know people, getting them to talk about things they don't want to talk about, and that's what our jewelry has served for us.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I just love that. That's and you put it so well too. So, um, look, so I'm looking at the time. Want to make sure that we, respect everybody's time, and also, try to create this module as something that can be digested because I know there's a lot that we just covered. I really appreciate you both bringing all this information and knowledge. We're gonna have to take this and cut it into little pieces too because I think there's just real gems in here that we covered today that people should really, I'm going to encourage everybody watching this to really go back and listen to specific answers in here that these ladies provided because, as somebody that I've been in the industry for a long time and I've gone through the ups and the downs and I've seen all these different products launch, we're not talking about just simple little tactics here. We're talking about that higher level strategy. And this is information that you really have to understand. And as much as you might think you understand it, it's likely, unless if you've been doing this for a long time, that you don't. And I say that humbly. I say that as somebody that I learned a lot today. And I learn a lot every time I listen to these kinds of conversations because when it is higher level strategy, it's like, oh, right, the little light bulbs go off. And I'm going to go back and listen to this again because I know that if I listen and hear the right way, that's what I was missing in my conversation before. That's why that product launch didn't work, right? This is the gold. These are the gems. So I just really appreciate you both bringing this information here today and sharing your time, sharing your experience, sharing your knowledge, putting the preparation into preparing for today too. So yeah, I just really wanted to say thank you and really, stress the importance of understanding your customer. I think that, you can understand your product inside and out. And if you don't understand who you're selling it to, it's going to sit on the shelf and you're going to fail just straight up. Um, at a certain point, if you can't communicate to who you're trying to get to buy it, there's too many other great products out there. I always think about like athletes, right? Every NBA player is extremely skilled and talented, but you have to understand how to work together, right? It's a higher level. It's strategy behind it that leads to successful winning teams. It's not just simply having skill and having a good product. We're past that point in cannabis. That was 20 years ago, right? Like that was like, hey, you show up with a bag and it's got amazing quality stuff in there and people smell it and go, wow. But we know for a fact now there's lots of great product out there that is sitting on shelves that never even comes to market, right? And so, we got to get past that point. So anyway, just want to throw that all out there today. I'd love to get any closing thoughts that you might have that you want people to really walk away with today. And then we'll go ahead and wrap.
Well, thanks again, Mike, for having us and for hosting this conversation. I'll close just by building on something you just shared. You mentioned a keyword, which is sales and selling, right? And working with a lot of early stage cannabis operators or startups or people who are even pre-licensed or non-licensed. I get the question a lot of times, why marketing now? It's too soon for marketing. But sales and marketing work hardest when they work together. I think undeniably people always understand that they need sales, but marketing is more than advertising. And the sooner you start to understand the strategy piece and what you're building towards, sometimes it can move the conversation faster. You know, marketing includes everything from your product, which we've talked a lot about. It also includes, you know, what's the right price for my product or service I'm selling? What's the right place? How do I build distribution, and promotion? How do I make people aware of it? How do I get people to try it? That's all included in marketing in the way that, you know, we define it and think about it. And when you're thinking about those things in cooperation with sales, I think, you know, you'll set yourself up for more long-term success.
Last thoughts for me, and thanks again, Mike, for having us here and having this conversation. I think it's really important, but I think one way to really be able to understand your customers and your consumers is that, you know, to step back and really think about your brand, what your strategy is behind your brand, what does your brand mean to you, what does it stand for, what is it really all about. So really thinking about who is your brand, why you're doing what you're doing, and what is your own language, I think will really help you identify who you're speaking to.
Awesome. Thank you for those closing thoughts. I'll just go ahead and say appreciate all of our social equity members at the National Cannabis Industry Association, the NCIA. I appreciate META and all the work that META is doing for social equity applicants in the state of Arizona and beyond. You know, please feel free to reach out to any of us. We're here to help. We're here to support. We want to build this community the right way. And that's why we're here today doing this. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, ladies, for providing all your experience and expertise. And everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you.